in this lesson, we take our knowledge of graphing in slope-intercept form and kind of do it backwards, whereas instead of being given the equation and creating the picture, we're being given information about the equation and we have to write it ourselves. Now remember, in the slope-intercept form formula, it goes y equals mx plus b, and remember m stands for the slope, and b stands for the y-intercept. So in order to write our equations, we just have to find out two things. We have to find out the slope and the y-intercept. Now, when you have a graph, it's very straightforward. You can just look at the picture and get those two pieces of information. So in this first one, we can easily see that the y-intercept is right here at 5. So if we're looking for m and b, we know that the b value is 5. And the slope we can get by counting the points. So I'll start at this dot, and then I'll go down 3 and right 2. And they actually gave me that in the picture, but they just went across and down instead of down and then across. But remember, I always like to go vertical first. So the slope would be -3 over 5. So then you just put it together in a formula. Y equals -3 over 5x plus 5. And then you're done. You move on. Pause the video and see if you can do letter B on your own. So we got that the equation was y equals 5/3 x minus 3 because the y-intercept was right here at -3 and the slope was up 5, right 3. This next one is a multiple choice, but we're going to do it the same way. Since we have a picture, we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept. Now, the y-intercept is always the easier one to find because you just have to look. You don't have to count anything. And you can see it's crossing right here at -4. Now, you might already know that a horizontal line has a slope of 0. But if you forgot that from the previous lesson, you would count. So we'd start here. We don't have to move up or down at all. So that would be 0 on the top. And then we move to the right 3. And 0 over 3 is the number 0. So you can calculate yourself if you haven't memorized it, but the slope of a horizontal line is 0. So with that information, which choice over here is the equation that has a slope of 0 and a y-intercept of -4? Hopefully you picked choice A, and if you were looking for y equals 0x minus 4, you were not wrong, but if there are 0 x's, then don't write any x's because that's what 0 means. It means that there aren't any. So the equation doesn't show any x's because there are 0 x's. Okay, now let's go down and look at a word problem, example 3. The graph shows the distance remaining to complete a tunnel. A, write an equation that represents the distance y in feet remaining after x months. So that's a fancy way of saying write the equation in slope-intercept form. So just like all the other ones, we need the slope and the intercept. So the m and the b, well, the b is right here at 0, 3,500. And the m is a little trickier. And here's why it's tricky. Because it's not just counting boxes. You see, even though it's down 4 boxes, it's not going down 4 because it went from 3,500 down to 1,500. So that's actually down 2,000. So you have to look at the numbers because it doesn't always go by ones. But then the time is going by ones, so you can count 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means that the slope is -500. So the equation would be y equals -500x plus 3,500. All right, letter B says, how much time does it take to complete the tunnel? Now, the tunnel is complete. Let's think real world. The tunnel is complete when there are 0 feet remaining. So if you look at the label, it says distance remaining. And so we're looking for where the distance remaining is 0 because there's no feet left when I'm done. And so that means I'm looking for the y value of 0, and it's right here at x equals 7. So the answer to that would be 7 months because you get it right off the graph. the fancy name for this is the X-intercept. Hopefully you remembered that name. All right, so that's how you do it when it's in a graph. It's very straightforward. You look for the two values. But sometimes they don't give you a picture. And in theory, you could plot the 2 points, but what if you don't have graph paper or something like that, you know? So there's other ways to find it. So this first example says writing an equation given 2 points with one of them being the y-intercept. So we have to write the equation that passes through these 2 points. So one alternative is to plot it, but I'm going to show you another way. The other way is to find the slope using the slope formula. So remember, the slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's go and let's label. So we have x1, y1, and x2, y2. So now we just go and we plug in our numbers. So this is going to be 5 minus 2 over 0 minus 4. So that gives me 3 over negative 4. So that's the slope. And preferably we put the negative with the numerator, but it's not wrong if you put it with the denominator. But typically you'll see it as negative 3/4, not 3 over negative 4. Then, remember, we need the slope and we need the y-intercept. So they actually gave us the y-intercept right here. It's 0, 5, right? Because when you're on the y-axis, your x value is 0. So the y-intercept point, they actually gave us right here at 0, 5. So the b value was 5. So now we can write our equation. And it is y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5. You see, they gave us the y-intercept point. In this last example, not so friendly. So they give us 2 points, so same kind of setup, but they don't give us the y-intercept. You see, neither of those 2 points have a 0 in the x spot, which means that neither of them are the y-intercept, right? Because the y-intercept has a 0 in the x spot. So we start off the same way. We use the slope formula. So let's label x1, y1, x2, y2. Let's plug in. Negative 5 minus 4 over negative 1 minus 2. That gives me negative 9 over negative 3, which reduces to the whole number, positive 3. So the slope is m equals positive 3. But now here's the thing. Neither of these is the y-intercept. So you're like, how do I figure that out? And here's what you do. We can do some algebra, and we can solve for the b by plugging in one of the points into y equals mx plus b. Now, you can use either point, but like everybody likes to use the positives because they're friendlier numbers. So we'll plug in 2, 4 in, and here's what we know. Remember, this is an x value and this is a y value. So in the formula, y equals mx plus b, we're going to plug in. We know that the m is 3 because we just calculated it, remember, over here. And using this point, we know that the x value is 2 because it's right here, and the y value is 4 because it's right here. So now we just plug it in the formula. So I'm going to plug in right there, but instead of y, I'm going to put 4. Instead of m, I'm going to put 3. Instead of x, I put 2, and I have to multiply. And then I don't know what b is, so I just leave it. So now you just calculate and do your, multiplication. So you get 4 equals 6 plus b. And then when you subtract 6, you get that the b value is negative 2. So we know our formula because we know our m and we know our b. So let's wrap this up and let's say that the equation is y equals 3x minus 2. All right, if you have any questions, write them down and ask me when you come to class.